The day I crossed $50,000 in savings, I felt two things at the same time: real pride and a quiet panic because I had no idea what to do next. So I did what most people do. I left it there until I had more time to think, and inflation quietly charged me about $1,500 a year for the privilege. If you have $50,000 sitting in cash right now, this video is the part I wish someone had stepped in and handled for me. The exact sequence that turns that $50,000 from just sitting there into the foundation of your first $100,000, without gambling, without stock picking, and without needing a finance degree. My name is Tom. $50,000 is the moment personal finance stops being about saving and starts being about deploying. The good news: the playbook is not complicated. The actual sequence is 7 steps. You don't need to remember every number, just remember the order. Subscribe if you want the whole thing. Let's talk at first. Why doing nothing is the most expensive option. When you have $50,000 saved, the fear of doing the wrong thing becomes more powerful than the discomfort of doing nothing. So the money sits, and sitting feels responsible, but it has a price tag most people never see. US inflation has averaged around 3% over the last decade. On $50,000, that's roughly $1,500 a year in purchasing power quietly disappearing. After 10 years of doing nothing, your account still reads $50,000, but it only buys what $37,000 bought when you started. You didn't make a reckless decision, you just waited. And waiting cost you $13,000. That's the invisible price tag on caution. Invisible ones are always the most expensive. Step 1. Move your emergency fund to a high-yield account. 3 to 6 months of living expenses need to stay liquid. If your monthly costs run around $4,000, that's $12,000 to $24,000 that needs to be accessible at any time. Most people keep this in a standard bank savings account earning 0.01% interest. That is not caution. That is your bank profiting from your money while paying you essentially nothing. As of 2026, high-yield savings accounts at online banks, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, Ally, SoFi, are paying meaningfully more. On a $15,000 emergency fund, the difference between 0.01% and 4% is roughly $600 per year in completely risk-free FDIC-insured interest. You take on no additional risk. You spend about 15 minutes opening an account. There is no rational argument for leaving this on the table. Do it before anything else. Step 2. Capture every dollar of your employer match. A quick note before this step: I'll be using US accounts as specific examples throughout. If you're outside the US, the account names are different, but the principle is identical. Use every tax-advantaged account your system offers before putting a dollar into a plain taxable account. If your employer offers a 401k match and you're not contributing enough to get the full match, fix this before investing anywhere else. A 100% employer match on the first 4% of your salary is a guaranteed 100% instant return before your money has done a single thing. At a $75,000 salary, that's $3,000 per year your employer is legally offering you in exchange for one HR enrollment task. That $3,000 per year at 8% returns over 25 years is over $200,000. Studies consistently find employees leave significant match money uncaptured, not because they can't afford to contribute, but because enrollment felt overwhelming. Meet the contribution requirement, no exceptions. Step 3. Eliminate high-interest debt. If you're carrying credit card debt at 20%, 22%, 24% interest, the national average is above 21% right now, paying it off is mathematically a better investment than anything the market offers. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% annually over the long run. Paying off a 22% credit card is a guaranteed, risk-free 22% return. Nothing in investing competes with that. Student loans are a judgment call. Under 5%, prioritize investing. Above 7%, pay it off first. Between 5% and 7%, pick whichever you'll actually stick with, because the best financial plan is the one you don't abandon 8 months in. No high-interest debt? Skip this step entirely and move on. Before we go further, you've now done 3 things: made your cash work harder, captured the free employer money, and stopped bleeding 20% plus interest. Those 3 moves alone put you ahead of the majority of people who reach this savings milestone. Now we can talk about actual investing.
Step 4. Max the Roth IRA every year.
In 2026, the contribution limit is $7,500 for those under 50. You contribute after-tax dollars, everything grows completely tax-free, and when you withdraw in retirement, you owe the government nothing on potentially decades of gains. Here's why this matters right now specifically. Most people watching this are in the 12% or 22% federal tax bracket. You pay taxes at those rates today. If this plan works, you'll be in a higher bracket later. Paying a small tax bill now to lock in tax-free growth on what could be hundreds of thousands in gains is one of the most asymmetric trades available to you. On $7,500 invested in a broad market index fund at 30, left untouched at historical average returns, you're looking at roughly $130,000 tax-free by 60. That's 1 year's contribution. Step 5. Push 401k contributions beyond the match. Once the Roth is maxed, increase your 401k contributions beyond what's required to get the match. In 2026, the limit is $23,500. Every dollar comes out pre-tax. If you earn $80,000 and contribute $15,000, you pay income tax on $65,000 that year. Depending on your state, that saves you $2,000 to $3,500 that goes directly into your retirement account instead of to the government. Step 6. Use the HSA as a stealth investment account. If you're enrolled in a high-deductible health plan, the HSA is the most powerful account in the U.S. tax code, and almost nobody uses it correctly. Triple advantage: contributions are tax-deductible, growth is tax-free, withdrawals for medical expenses are tax-free. In 2026, $4,300 individual limit, $8,550 family. The move most people miss? Pay current medical expenses out of pocket, invest the HSA funds in index funds, save your receipts, and reimburse yourself years later from an account that's been compounding for a decade. There is no time limit on HSA reimbursements. After 65, you can withdraw for any reason at standard income tax rates, making it a de facto second traditional IRA. Stop using it as a debit card for copays. If this sequence is landing, hit like. It helps this reach someone who needs it. One more step, and it's the one most people overthink. Step 7. Invest the rest and keep it simple. Everything remaining from your $50,000 after funding the tax-advantaged accounts goes into a taxable brokerage invested in broad market index funds. The financial industry has a significant financial interest in convincing you this decision is complicated. It is not. The SPIVA scorecard tracks professional fund managers against their benchmark index every year. Over 15 years, more than 90% of actively managed funds underperform the index they're trying to beat, with Ivy League degrees, Bloomberg terminals, and teams of analysts. The expense ratio difference alone, an active fund at 0.6% versus an index fund at 0.03%, on $50,000 over 30 years, costs you roughly $130,000 in fees. Not underperformance, just fees, for a manager who will statistically underperform anyway. The practical allocation. A broad U.S. market index fund like VTI or FZROX as the core, VXUS for international exposure, or a single target date index fund that rebalances automatically. Warren Buffett has said he wants 90% of his wife's inheritance in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. When the person who arguably understands markets better than anyone points at the boring index fund for his own family, that ends the debate. The biggest threat is not volatility, not inflation, not a bad fund choice. It's the emotional decisions you make when markets move. Dalbar's research consistently finds the average equity investor significantly underperforms the index, not because of poor fund selection, but because of timing decisions. Buying after a run-up, selling after a drop, waiting in cash for things to calm down while the market recovers without them. JP Morgan calculated that missing just the 10 best trading days over a 20-year period cuts your portfolio value by more than half. 7 of those 10 best days historically occur within 2 weeks of the 10 worst. The people who sell during the fear sell directly before the recovery. Every time. The fix is structural. Automate contributions to every account. Set the allocation once, then remove yourself from the decision-making loop. The more opportunities you give yourself to react, the worse your returns get. Automation doesn't just save time, it saves you from yourself.
The next discussion is what $50,000 deployed correctly looks like in 5 years. 2 people, same age, same $50,000. One follows the sequence. One leaves it in a standard savings account, intending to figure it out later. 5 years later, the person who waited has roughly $51,500 nominally. In real purchasing power, closer to $44,000 after inflation. No reckless decisions, just caution with a $6,000 price tag. The person who followed the sequence, emergency fund earning real interest, full employer match captured every year, Roth IRA compounding tax-free, 401k contributions reducing taxable income, remaining balance in index funds. 5 years later, across all accounts, something closer to $100,000. No lucky picks, no market timing, just a sequence executed once and automated. The gap between those 2 people is not intelligence or income. It is one decision made at the exact moment you're at right now. There's a well-known observation in investing that the first $100,000 is the hardest milestone, and you're halfway there. Once compound interest has a large enough base, the math starts working for you instead of against you. At 7% annual returns on $100,000, you're generating $7,000 a year passively. The second $100,000 arrives faster than the first, the third faster than the second. Your $50,000 is the base that sets all of that in motion. The decision you make about it right now determines how fast the rest follows. Your $50,000 took real discipline to build. The only question now is whether it quietly loses ground in a savings account or whether it becomes the foundation of the first $100,000 that changes how fast everything else grows. Before you click away, do 2 things. First, comment with where your $50,000 is sitting right now. "It's all in my checking account" is a very common answer, and there's no judgment. I just want to know where you are. Second, watch the video I've linked here. It walks through exactly what to do if you're not at $50,000 yet, so you can get to this stage faster. I'll see you there.